In this video, I aim to expose how important the French Revolution was by showing some of the most seemingly insignificant causes and consequences. I'm going to look at 4 things: lightning rods, Illuminati conspiracy theories and the fall of the Federalist Party in the USA, English Gothic novels, and the content of board games. Firstly, lightning rods. Lightning rods were a cause of the French Revolution. They inspired some of the leaders, although it must be said that they did not kindle the popular uprising. Science and the French Revolution are inextricably linked. Rather than God and tradition, as under the monarchy, the revolutionaries wanted science and reason. It is obvious what a king thinks. Less so with people. The will of the people can be compared to some scientific concepts, like magnetic fields. Both magnetic fields and the will of the people are invisible. Scientists were therefore key to democracy, as they could visualise this invisible will of the people. They did this through many ways, perhaps including lightning. Lightning had always been a symbol of authority and power. On this frontispiece to Hobbes's Leviathan, we can see, among others, castles, cannons, a crown, a mitre, and lightning bolts. They are all symbols of absolute power. The king was associated with lightning as he was sovereign. The revolutionaries tried to redirect the force of lightning towards the king. Here, in an allegorical print from 1792, Liberty strikes the remnants of the French monarchy down with lightning. She repels the dark clouds, literal enlightenment. If liberty is the French people, this is quite literally a flash mob. Like a flash mob, the will of the people erupts spontaneously, invisible, until bright, dramatic, and absolute. Revolutionaries thought that if they could conduct the will of the people towards the enemies of the people, they would be victorious. And previously, revolutionaries had discovered how to conduct lightning. This is a Benjamin West depiction of Benjamin Franklin's famous kite experiment. Revolutionaries viewed Franklin as having tamed lightning, what they viewed as power. They idolised him, especially because he had been the ambassador equivalent to France. Marat, the revolutionary immortalised by that David painting, was previously a scientist. He had specifically investigated electricity. Robespierre, perhaps the most famous, had been a lawyer. However, this does not separate him from electricity. He had defended someone who had installed a lightning rod on their home in a well-publicised court case, arguing that it was good for science, thereby showing him to be an effective lawyer. Science, and specifically electricity, was linked with the French Revolution greatly. Revolutionaries viewed themselves as sovereigns, as they had tamed lightning. Lightning, therefore, inspired in part revolution. If the revolutionaries could conduct lightning, then they could conduct the will of the people. There was a significant rise in Illuminati conspiracy theories after the French Revolution. The rise was primarily due to a scientist, John Robison, a major contributor to the 3rd edition of the Encyclopaedia Britannica. Robison's scientific career was overshadowed by his sell-out book, Proofs of a Conspiracy Against All the Religions and Governments of Europe, which attempted to answer, and was inspired by, the question: what caused and propelled the violence of the French Revolution? Robison's answer was an underground Masonic cell known as the Illuminati, which was taking over established institutions and placing people under the control of an invisible overlord. This mystical force was behind the French Revolution, and through Napoleon Bonaparte was imposing their tyranny on other European monarchies. Robertson argued that rather than enlightenment, it was illumination that was behind the French Revolution. Rather than the scientists, it was the Illuminati, a single higher power. He argued that because many of the scientists were executed, they cannot have been responsible. Other conspiracy theories about the French Revolution were not as interconnected as Robertson's, and that is why they were less successful. Robertson did not invent the Illuminati. It was an organisation that already existed, a relatively secret organisation nonetheless. Robertson claimed that they were responsible. As evidence to support his claim, Robertson looked at the structure of the Illuminati. He observed that it was ridiculously over-engineered. He therefore concluded that it must have been larger than on the surface. Here we can see the symbol of the Bavarian Illuminati, the real-life organisation. The Owl of Minerva and the book symbolise wisdom. On the right is a representation of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen in 1789, painted by Jean-Jacques François Le Barbier. We can see, at the very top, the Eye of Providence, and above the main body of the text, the red Phrygian cap. On the left, La Liberté ou la Mort, from 1795, by Jean-Baptiste Reynaud. We can see the red Phrygian cap here as well. The Eye of Providence and the red Phrygian cap are associated with Freemasonry. Nowadays, the Eye of Providence is associated with Illuminati. This was not always the case. Originally, it symbolised the Eye of God. But because it symbolised a higher power watching over the world, it also symbolised Freemasonry and the Illuminati. The red Phrygian cap was associated with the freedom of slaves in Rome, much like free masonry. According to Robertson, Freemasonry was a source of destruction. Robertson himself was a Freemason. He observed on continental Europe that Freemasonry was very irreligious. He therefore connected the Illuminati with Freemasons. In this picture from before, we can also see the red Phrygian cap. Robertson's conspiracy theory took hold in Europe and America, but less so in Britain. George Washington himself was a Freemason, as depicted here. Many of the founding fathers were also. Jefferson was accused of being the candidate of the Illuminati by members of the Federalist Party, which favoured a powerful state and feared the ideas of the French Revolution. The Federalists became obsessed by this idea. Other Democratic Republicans turned the Federalists' accusations against them, claiming that they were just hiding that they themselves were members of the Illuminati. The Federalist Party, after these allegations were thrown back and forth, never won another presidential election. Perhaps the French Revolution led to the Federalist Party's downfall. The Eye of Providence features on the Great Seal of the USA, and therefore on the $1 bill. Here, the design is signed off by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Here is the actual design of the $1 bill. We can see that the sides of the Great Seal have been flipped, and "In God We Trust" has been added. The Eye of Providence features on the left. It has nothing to do with the Illuminati, Freemasonry, or anything untoward. However, it has been seized upon by modern conspiracy theorists. QAnon's ideology is much similar to Robertson's. They have one protagonist, one ideology, one enemy. It's a fight between good and evil. Perhaps their theory had similar US electoral consequences. The rise in Illuminati conspiracy theories after the French Revolution is an indisputable consequence of the French Revolution. The fall of the Federalist Party in the USA is perhaps a more indirect consequence. The English Gothic novel was another consequence of the French Revolution. Fear was propagated in Britain, both of the threat of revolution spreading to Britain and of the new French Republic. The anxiety from the 1790s continued far into the 19th century, driving writers to the Gothic form of terror, romance, and the paranormal. It helped them to come to terms with what they viewed as paranormal events. The mood of the country propelled these books to great success. The novel form allows authors to write about the philosophy of the revolutionaries, often discreetly advocating the status quo, by showing the chaos of change, without receiving any backlash. The French Revolution also raised questions about the role of women in society. Anne Radcliffe was the pioneer of Gothic fiction. Her female characters were submissive and incapable of decision-making. She therefore promoted the status quo. Jane Austen, who died in Winchester, in Northanger Abbey, engages with the debate of women's rights. Catherine Morland, the protagonist of her novel, undertakes a journey to better understand herself and the world, the male-dominated world. Mary Shelley engages with the discussion too. In Frankenstein, rather than the usual man born of woman, man is born of man. Although at first this might be seen as promoting a change in women's rights, it actually promotes the status quo by showing the chaos of change. English Gothic novels showed the need to explore the supernatural. Although their output today is non-existent effectively, their influence can be seen on TV, in novels, and elsewhere. They are a much more major consequence of the French Revolution than many people assume. The final consequence of the French Revolution that I'm going to look at relates to board games. The French Revolution caused a seismic shift within their content. This is the Royal Game of Ur. You can see it at the British Museum. It shows us the age of board games, very old. It confirms that their invention was most certainly not a consequence of the French Revolution. Other board games were common across the world. Senet in Egypt, Tabula in Greece, Latrones in Rome, Liubo in China, Moksha Patam in India. The key thing with all of these board games was that they had abstract designs, circles, shapes, holes, dice and counters. With Enlightenment and the dawn of capitalism, board games became less abstract, attempting to appeal to consumers. We see track games developed, much like the Game of Ur, but with squares symbolising something. On the left, we see the Game of Goose, El Juego de la Oca. Versions of Snakes and Ladders were also produced at this time. On the right is a charming hand-coloured Dutch steamboats game. Its reason for creation? To sell tickets for the steamboat line. The objective of the game? To reach the port of Dordrecht, the line being from Rotterdam to that port. Some hazards en route prevent this from being a walk in the park. Well, they're more of distractions than hazards, as this is a promotional tool. There's a glass of Geneva, a cup of coffee, and a carriage ride. The plague house, or Pesthuis, is the only ominous presence on the board. Progress was key to these board games. Reaching the finish line first was one of the main objectives. It might be the port of Dordrecht, as we saw before. It might be, as on the left, the North Pole. Around the World in 80 Days was a favourite of board game manufacturers. The board game on the right depicts American journalist Nellie Bly's 73-day-long attempt to beat Jules Verne's Phileas Fogg. This game, modelled on the game of Goose, deals with morality in part. The aim is to reach the age of 84. It is Protestant and text-heavy. It really does show the impact of capitalism and enlightenment on board games, from abstract shapes to this block of text. In all of the examples we have looked at so far, the progress is physical. Travelling around the world, travelling on a steamboat line, or to the North Pole, or even just through time. With the French Revolution, this changed. This game is similarly modelled on the game of Goose. It depicts the events of the French Revolution. Despite appearing to depict physical progress, it really shows political progress. A few idiot geese, as the board calls them, i.e. the parliaments of the old regime, delay the political progress. This game also shows progress that is less physical. It starts at the Garden of Eden and works through time with progress towards reason, culminating in the central character, who symbolises the abolition of the slave trade. Here is another game about the progress of humanity, rising from Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark and the Tower of Babel, through all of history to history's peak, Queen Victoria. How Queen Victoria is the epitome of morality. We see that in this game, after the French Revolution, progress is not physical, but again, metaphorical and moral. French revolutionaries decimalised everything, or at least they tried to. They tried to decimalize time and the calendar, removing any Christian or royal influences. The king in chess was to be renamed Le Drapeau, or the flag. They unofficially tried to redesign playing cards, such as here, replacing the monarchy figures with the law, the spirit of peace, and the freedom of the press, to name just a few. They also cemented the ace as the highest card, rather than the king, as had been traditional. This clearly symbolises the popular uprising of the French Revolution. We still see board games designed to promote government's aims, with moral progress. Monopoly focuses on the accumulation of capital. It is certainly designed for capitalists. The Victorian reinvention of snakes and ladders has an explicit moral purpose. Overall, the French Revolution marked a paradigm shift in the design and meaning of board games. Thank you for watching this video about unusual causes and consequences of the French Revolution. Through this video, I hope to have shown that there was not one single cause or consequence of the revolution, but many. It had a widespread impact on all walks of life, often viewed as incomparable to any other event of modern-day history. If you enjoyed this video, please find more content on godpress.wixsite.com/cornucopia.